Hi, I wanted to show you how simple it is to hook up a control panel. In this case, it's a 4820 panel, like you see here. I'd like to make an light controller for this, DMX controlled lights. What you see here is a schematic page. It's actually the 7th page of the application schematics, and I'm going to use this panel to create a light controller. As you see, I'm going to have different colored lights: red, green, blue, and white light. So I use those key color caps to make it easy to identify which switch controls which light. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how simple it is to hook that up here. What I'm going to also use is the green light of each switch to indicate that it's on or not. For now, I'm not going to worry about the red lights. I will not program them for anything, so I'm not going to bother hooking them up. But to start with, let's use the light switch connections themselves. What I'm going to connect it to is an Arduino Uno, which is shown here on this side. So I'm going to take switch number 1, and I'm going to wire it up to the first digital input. We'll call it D2. I'm going to take the second switch and wire it to the next one and call that D3. The third switch, and I'm going to wire that to D4. And the fourth switch to D5. Relatively simple. Next, I'm going to take the switch common because I need to make a complete circuit. And normally, I would just tie this straight to ground. In this case, because I want to add some more of these boards later to give me control of multiple lights, I'm going to actually multiplex these. So what it means is instead of tying it to ground, I'm going to tie the switch common instead to a digital input, in this case D6. Now what I'll do to read any of these 4 switches, I will just set this to low. And that'll allow me to read those 4 switches. Later on, I will connect another one of these two using these same 4 switch connections to the same 4 here, but using a different common wire, which will give me another whole set of switches without using 4 additional inputs on my Arduino. I don't have that many after all. So the switches are done. Now normally I would take the switch ground and it would tie it to ground, but since I'm multiplexing it, I don't want to do that. So that jumper that is normally on here, the switch ground right here, I'm going to make sure to cut that so it won't short out to anything. Next, I'm going to look at the LEDs. I'm going to use the 4 green LEDs, and I'm going to tie them to 4 of the digital outputs. In this case, the first green LED is LED 2. I'm going to connect that to D13, LED 4. Connect that to D12, LED number 6. Wire that to D11. And LED number 8. I'll wire that to D10. Now I can do the same thing here and multiplex the LEDs. So instead of taking my LED common, which we'll take this one here, pin 23 is the common for these LEDs. Now I would tie them to ground, but instead I'm going to tie them to a digital control signal, D9. And again, the same thing happens. If I just drive that low, I will be able to control all these LEDs. Later on, I'll take these 4 LED control signals, wire them to yet another board, and I will be able to, by driving that other one low and this one high, control those 4 LEDs without using the extra 4 outputs of my Arduino. So as you can see, I still have plenty of analog signals, and I still have a few digital signals to connect to the other switch and LED. Now the last thing I want to do is my potentiometer. I want to have that be a light intensity control. So I'm going to connect that up to my Arduino also. I'm going to use pot 1. So I take pot 1, connect that of course to A0 of my Arduino. Now the only thing I need to do there is take my low of the pot, and that needs to be tied to a ground. There's no problem just tying that to ground. So we'll wire this up. I know this isn't the neatest, but it does the job. At least to get me organized on how I want to connect everything. Now I'll take the pot high signal, the other side of the pot, and I'm going to wire that to the +5. That puts 5 volts across this pot. So by turning the pot, I will get 0 to 5 volts going into A0. I will read A0 and use that to determine the intensity of my light. The one last thing, the pots is not a problem tying it to ground, so there's a jumper on the pot ground. I will leave that connected. And by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, the LED ground, I'm going to cut that one also, because I'm using the multiplex mode of controlling the LEDs as well as the switches. So there we go. We have all the inputs, the red, the green, the blue, and the white switch, and we have the pot control and the green LEDs, which I will have turn on to indicate that was selected. The one last thing I want to do is my output. In this case, I'm going to tie the serial signal of the Arduino, which I have indicated on here, and that's going to go to a serial communication device that's going to convert that into a DMX controller for my light control. So here we have my transmit signal from the Arduino, and that, and the ground, of course, to go with it, which is right here. And this will go into my DMX converter. And from there, it'll control the lights. Okay, so that's kind of an ugly way of drawing it, but now that I have this figured out, I can now wire this up and start writing my program and see how it works. Okay, I've wired up my Arduino with the control panel, and that is wired into a DMX converter, and here I have a DMX Light. So let's give it a try. The program is loaded in, and we'll start with a lower intensity. Here is my red, and it turns the red light on. The green, and here is the blue channel. I can match the colors. That will produce a yellow, or green and blue will produce an aqua, or I can use red and blue to produce a purple light. Now let's try this at full intensity. Oh, there's white light. So at full intensity, press my red button, I have red light. Turn that off, press the green, I have my green channel, and if I press the blue, I have my blue channel. I can match colors and produce a purple with red and blue, or I can turn them off and get yellow with red and green, or if I want, I can get aqua with the blue and green. Or I can use all three colors to produce a white, or if I want to save a little effort, press the white button, and all three channels go on. And that is my DMX light controller.